Hey there everyone, it's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're reading lots of books. And today is a special one. A rereading of All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy, Volume 1 of the Border Trilogy. I read this about 5 years ago for the first time and I liked it. I appreciated it, but on this rereading, I've come to truly love it. I just don't think I was able to truly appreciate at the time just how amazing a story it really is. I mean, it really is an adventure story of sorts, and it's a huge departure from Cormac's previous work prior to this one's release. I mean, the book that came out before this one was Blood Meridian, which is also a Western, but is on a completely different spectrum altogether. I mean, that book, to my mind, is like the definition of evil. This one here contains elements of romanticism in it. And it's a bit more simpler as well. I mean, the dialogue and the text is more direct for you, and I can definitely see how this one became a mainstream success. I mean, when you look at all the books that he released prior to this one in 1992, I think not one of his books sold more than 5,000 copies in its original release, and this one sold like over 100,000 in the first 3 months. And I can definitely see why. I mean, on this rereading, I can definitely see why. Especially in comparison to my previous book of his that I read, The Orchard Keeper. This one is just so much easier to just get through. It flows way easier, and also, to my mind, also has a far greater story in it. The tale of John Grady Cole and his best pal Lacey Rawlins, both of them I think are 16 or 17 years of age, who, after John realizes that his family ranch is sold after a loved one has died, he decides to go with Lacey and travel from their hometown in Texas across the border of Mexico in search of both adventure and just of work. And it proceeds. It's almost like every 50 pages, the plot changes. It goes into a different direction, and it keeps you reinvigorated. It keeps your interest in the book from the get-go all the way to the very end. It's just there's no slow spots in this thing. It just keeps on moving. It reminded me a lot of No Country for Old Men, with the plot in that book. It was like a powered train just always blasting through. Now, this book isn't as well paced as No Country for Old Men, but I was still able to get through this in quite a quick reading succession. And on top of that, I was able to truly appreciate a lot of the similes and just not only his writing style. I mean, I've always been a fan of his writing style and being a fan of it as it's changed and progressed throughout the years. But just the way he describes landscapes and the way he describes Mexico in particular is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there's lots of talks of just desert plains with storms overhead and of wildlife. And in particular, as it says in the title, horses. There are lots of talk about horses in this thing, all the very different kinds of breeds and how John and Lacey go about breaking horses, taming them. There's a really fascinating section where after they get hired as basically ranch hands, they spend about a week or so just breaking all these new horses in for the owner, whose daughter Alejandra John falls in love with, which is a plot I've not seen in a book of his that I've read yet. I mean, I haven't read The Crossing or Cities of the Plain, so I'm not sure what the romanticism is like in those books there. But in particular, compared to everything that he wrote prior to this, there's just no element of romanticism in his work. I mean, there's a twisted sense of it in Suttree when Cornelius Suttree shacks up with a prostitute, or even the incestual relationship that is between the brother and the sister in Outer Dark. But nothing as sweet and tender as what's in this book here, even though it's a small chunk of the book. I mean, people say it's a romantic book, but in reality, I'd say there's probably like 40 pages dedicated to a romantic subplot, and the rest of it is just sheer Western, just a true idea of the West. Now, after they leave their hometown and begin their trek into Mexico, they come across this other boy. He's about 14 years old, and he goes by the name of Jimmy Blevins. And they're not quite sure what to make of him. And as a reader, I wasn't sure what to make of him either, because I considered him to be somewhat of an unreliable person, an unreliable perspective in the story. And I can't remember much of this from my first reading, but as I was going through this book, and every time Jimmy Blevins would pop up in the story, I kept thinking there's just something off about this guy. Just everything he tells me, I do not trust him at all. I do not believe a word he says. And at the end there, you get a bit of a resolution as to where Jimmy Blevins came from and whether or not his name is actually Jimmy Blevins. I won't spoil it for you, but he was a bit of an unreliable supporting character that yeah, he kept my interest, but I just wasn't sure what to make of him. And he's still a fascinating character, the way he integrates himself into this company of two. And in particular, the camaraderie that is also between John and Lacey. You can tell they're best buds, and some of the conversations they have, particularly as they're laying down at night in the plains of the desert, just talking about God and believing in heaven and that sort of thing. And there's an absolutely wonderful line towards the end of the book where John talks about God in particular. So this is a captain saying, "Are you no afraid of God?" And John replies, "I got no reason to be afraid of him. I've got even a bone or two to pick with him." "You should be afraid of God," the captain said. "You are not the officer of the law. You do not have authority." John Grady stood leaning on the rifle. He turned and spat dryly and eyed the captain. So he has issues with God, obviously, and that theme pops up throughout the book. It's not prevalent, but it's there. But if I'm to be completely honest, my favorite sections were in the opening 100 pages, where the three of them are just traveling from Texas across the border, across the river into Mexico, and just making their way into the various towns. And it's the descriptions of the landscapes that are just absolutely stunning. The descriptions of animals that are second to none in comparison to any other writer that I've read out there. And I'm sure there are plenty of writers out there who can write this way, but I just haven't encountered them yet. So if there's anyone out there that you think is like Cormac McCarthy in these descriptions, please let me know and I'll definitely read them. But I'm going to read to you a few similes that I found to be absolutely brilliant, top level stuff. So this is where they've camped and Jimmy has caught a rabbit and is preparing it. And this is the description of it. What they dredged smoking out of the ground looked like some desiccated effigy from a tomb. How brilliant is that? Another one, 2 pages later, actually, which involves lightning and welding. The combination of these two together is probably my favorite line in the whole book. They slumped bleary-eyed in their saddles and looked at one another. Shrouded in the black thunderheads, the distant lightning glowed mutely like welding seen through foundry smoke, as if repairs were underway at some flawed place in the iron dark of the world. That has to go in my top 10 favorite lines written by Cormac McCarthy of all time. It really, really is. There are many, many passages in this book that just rank up there for me. And honestly, I truly do say this when I believe that this was a real underappreciated work for me. I mean, I love No Country for Old Men. I love Stella Maris and even The Passenger, and I love Suttree and Blood Meridian. But I always pushed all the Pretty Horses to the side. For some reason, I considered it a lesser work. And I was wrong. This is a great piece of work. It really, really is. I really fell in love with this book quite quickly. Another passage is from page 115, and it's where they're working on the ranch, and there's this guy who works there as well, and he talks about the souls of horses in a really detailed and really beautiful way. It's absolutely stunning writing. So this is the latter end of the speech. I mean, it goes on for 2 pages prior to this, but this paragraph in particular I quite like. Lastly, he said that he had seen the souls of horses and that it was a terrible thing to see. He said that it could be seen under certain circumstances attending the death of a horse because the horse shares a common soul and its separate life only forms it out of all horses and makes it mortal. He said that if a person understood the soul of the horse, then he would understand all horses that ever were. So that's all in the first half of the book, and I do think that the first half of the book is probably greater than the second half of the book, but that's no means a bad thing to say, because it really is just a great piece of work overall. So they go across the border into Mexico. They get into some trouble involving Blevins and his pistol and his horse. He somehow has this amazingly well-bred horse, and he carries this pistol. And when they ask him about it, he seems to give this off-the-cuff answer as to where he acquired them, but they don't quite believe him. And neither do you as the reader either, or at least I didn't. And his horse, during a storm, where for some reason he's just absolutely afraid of lightning, he takes off all his clothes and his horse runs away. They find that his horse and his pistol have been acquired by someone else in a town. So they steal the horse back, and Blevins leads them off in another direction, and they take off into the plains. And you don't see Blevins again for a little while. He pops in and out of the story, at least for the first 150 pages. I won't say what happens to Blevins in the end. But they make their way to a ranch, and they get work there, obviously, as for breaking horses. And it's there he falls in love with Alejandra, the daughter. And it's also there where you meet this very interesting character who is Alejandra's aunt. And she's only in two segments of this book, but both of them are quite memorable. They're probably the 2 most interesting aspects of the book. The first one is where, when you first meet her, she invites him in and they play a game of chess. Not much dialogue is spoken in this scene, but they're playing a game of chess, and it's only later on that you're told that she's missing 2 fingers from her hand from a pigeon shooting accident. So you see that she's got a bit of a dark past with her. But it's the second encounter, which is almost at the very end of the book, where she goes on a massive, I mean, it must be like a 15-page diatribe, a speech that she gives to John about her life and the people that she was accommodated, the people that she accompanied, and about her time spent in Europe and in America, and her relations with people who ended up becoming involved with the Mexican Revolution. In particular, one person that she knew who, it was probably the most violent part of the book. He has his one fake eye, and they take him out onto the street. They prick his good eye. They burn him. They go to execute him, but someone knocks the hand away, and it ends up blowing away his jaw. And then eventually they let him just cower down. And they put a gun into his head and blow him away. And it's told in a very graphic detail, but it's all almost like past tense. It's told from her perspective, so you don't actually read it as it's happening. But it's a very brutal sequence. It's the most brutal sequence in the book. And apart from a knife fight which happens in the extended jail segment, it's one of only a few instances of true hyper-violence in the book, and for an otherwise actually quite tame novel, no pun intended. I mean, compared to all his previous work and a lot of his work that came afterwards, this is quite a tame book. But it was so tame that instance of violence that is depicted in the book is just so off-putting. It's like, whoa, okay. I understand why he put it in there, but it doesn't gel with everything else that happens in the book. So it was quite a jarring tone there. I'm not against it. I mean, it's a wonderful speech that she gives, and the lead up to it is quite brilliant. But I just wasn't expecting that level of violence, given everything that I've read throughout this book. It just came out of nowhere for me. But apart from that, I think she was the best character in the book, and she's not in it much. She's only in it for those 2 segments. She's the wealthy aunt or great aunt of Alejandra, who disapproves of the growing relationship, the growing love between Alejandra and John Grady Cole. And their relationship is told in a short extended burst where they go out during a nighttime and ride. They're sitting along the lake and looking up at the stars falling and that sort of thing. And it is beautiful. It is quite unique. But then, obviously, being a Cormac McCarthy novel, it doesn't end well, and they get carted off to jail. And I'm just going to end it there because I think you should just read the book just to find out what happens. There's a lot more that happens in the book than that. But as I said before, it's like every 50 pages, it churns out a new plot twist for you. The plot changes direction. So it really is an adventure book, this thing. It really takes you on quite a long journey. Even though it's only 300 pages, it felt like I was just looking at an extended 4 month in the life of this character, who seems to have lived quite a hard life, given that he's only 16 years old. I mean, him and Lacey are like 16, 17, and Jimmy Blevins is only 14, I believe. And they have this manliness about them that's unseen in today's culture. But the prison sequence is quite jarring as well. There's quite a lot of threatening overtones that happen in that, especially in the first few days where they're having to basically fight for their lives. But as for the writing in the second half of the novel, I was also quite entranced with it as well. And being a McCarthy novel, I was expecting a dream sequence. I really was, and we go on, and it's stellar. So this is when he's in hospital in the jail. He slept, and when he woke, he dreamt of the dead standing about in their bones and dark sockets of their eyes that were indeed without speculation bottomed in the void wherein lay a terrible intelligence common to all but of which none would speak. When he woke, he knew that men had died in that room. And for a final simile I'm going to give you, I think this is quite good as well. This is in the latter half of the novel. He looked into those blue eyes like a man seeking some vision of the increate future of the universe. Oh man, I really fall in love with McCarthy's writing. And I'm sure if you watch this video, you're clearly a fan of him as well. Just every time, for all the books of his that I've reread, I seem to like it more than I did the first time I read it, which is the makings of a great book. A book that gives more each time you read it. I mean, it happened with No Country for Old Men. It happened with Such. It happened with Blood Meridian. To a lesser extent, but still in a good way, it happened with Child of God. And it's happened with All the Pretty Horses. I've come to appreciate these novels more with each reread. And I know for a damn fact that in future years, when I come back to these books, I'm pretty sure I will appreciate them even more and pick up even more from them. He's the author that keeps on giving, even though he has a very select bibliography. There's just so much thematics there, so much juice, so much great writing that you just get really emotional talking about it. All the Pretty Horses is not my favorite book, but for me to talk with such high regard about it just shows how great his bibliography truly is. And this is a great book in my mind. I definitely prefer this over The Orchard Keeper. The Orchard Keeper I've only read once, and I do maintain that if I probably reread it, I might like it a lot more than I did the first time around. But I was still a bit hesitant about what happened in that book, so I really need to do some more research. But this here being a border book detailing, his times in Mexico and after that in Texas when he's sort of just lounging around going from place to place at the end of the book, I really came to like him as a character, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he gets up to in the third book, Cities of the Plain, where he hangs out with the main character from the second book, The Crossing, which I'm just about to start. I'm really, really looking forward to it. It should prove to this read through of the Border Trilogy should prove to be an enlightening experience, and everyone's telling me that The Crossing is the best book in the trilogy, that it's a more melancholic book, that it's darker, and I cannot wait to start it. I really, really am. In fact, I'm going to start it as soon as I finish this video. So, I highly recommend All the Pretty Horses, and I cannot wait to continue with this journey with Cormac McCarthy. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.